everyone. Welcome back to Return of the Obra Dinn. I'm Nito King, and I'm here with the McD.
Hey, I'm still here. Maybe my internet won't die this time.
Let's hope so, because I think we have a lot to do. I want to start by addressing some of the YouTube comments from the videos from the first session. Yes, I'm aware that there are no comments yet, because I haven't actually posted the videos. But they will someday be posted, and sometime after that, I will enable comments on them. And when we get to that point, I expect to get a bunch of comments from people basically telling me I have no idea how to play the game. And honestly, they're right. I don't have any idea how to play the game. I think I made a complete hash of the first session, but I do need to defend myself in a couple of ways. I mean, you've seen the counter that says things I feel the game didn't explain to me properly that definitely enhanced my experience once I actually knew what was going on. But more than that, just some personal issues that I have, particularly with things like facial recognition. The sketch at the front of the book, yes, in post, I noticed that it was exactly the same sketch that was at the back of the book. Just the time that I chose to compare the two, I was looking at the picture that had everyone blurred compared to the picture that had everything in focus. So there was not a single visual element the same between the two pictures, and my brain just refused to accept that I was looking at the same thing. I made some convolutions like, well, maybe the two sketches were switched in position and that's why I didn't recognize it. No, it was just different levels of focus. That was all. Now that I know that, I think I'm going to do a much better job. The other comment that I know I'm going to have gotten a lot of is something I actually brought up the other day. I was talking to my friend Brian, pointing out that there was symbolism is this gigantic thing in art anymore. And it made me hate any kind of literary criticism or literary analysis. Because back when I was in high school especially, we'd always have these literature classes. They'd always tell us to read the book. And I would read the book. And, the first time I'm reading, I just want to know what the heck is going on. What is this book? What is Upton Sinclair's The Jungle? Clearly there's no jungle in it, so what is it actually about? What's his Lord of the Flies thing? I'm looking for this giant insect king. There's no giant insect king. There's just a bunch of kids on an island killing each other. And somehow or other, when I get to the end of it, I've got a sense of what the plot was, but the questions that people are asking me are always going to be things like, what concept of human civilization was represented when they broke the kid's glasses? I don't know how any of this is supposed to relate to human society as a whole. All I know is the kid can't see anymore. And also I think he was dead. So there's this big thing in the art world that seems to be the first time you experience something, you're supposed to understand it in a very deep way that just isn't me. I just want to know what the story is. I want to know who the characters are, what they're doing, and if I'm entertained enough, if I feel compelled to go back and re-experience that story, then I won't have to think as much about the broader picture. I will be able to home in on the symbolism and those little details and possibly draw conclusions even the original author never saw coming. It happens a lot of the time when I write. People will point out things I didn't even see that I was doing. And I go, wow, that's really clever. And I just don't feel compelled to ask, how many times did you read it before you noticed that? So the point I'm trying to make here, and, to get back to Return of the Obra Dinn, McD, what was my friend's name?
Derek?
And I think I've made my point.
Hey.
I was telling a whole story here, and I just slipped in a detail that you heard and threw away because it didn't have anything to do with the rest of what I was saying. There are a lot of names in this game that just get dropped in the middle of nowhere. I don't know who these people are, so I miss that kind of stuff. Going back and watching the videos during the editing process, I was able to pick up those details because I'm no longer trying to think, what the heck are all these tentacles attached to? Why are these guys killing each other in the middle of a mutiny? So, yeah. I have a better sense now of what sorts of details I was supposed to be looking for, but, the first time through, I didn't even notice that the names were there. Point made?
I mean, you're asking this towards the comments that don't even exist yet. I think we're going towards the void on several levels here.
Oh, that was kind of the point. The story was just rambling. I don't actually have a friend named Brian, despite the probably tens of comments already in the video telling me, oh, hey, they remember my friend's name was Brian. Well, good for you guys. I'm going to take a little longer to get through this game than maybe you're comfortable with. However, having the chance to freeze frame, go back and compare the things that are happening in the different videos, I have discovered a lot of stuff about the game that I'd like to open by recapping just what I've figured out from editing the videos without gaining any new information from the game. Then we'll start looking into new stuff. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay, then.
Take a look.
So my first big conclusion is that there's an entire mechanic in the game that I completely forgot about. That I can just pick random people that I see and identify them without having to be in their death scene, with the book opening directly to their page and focusing on them. So there are a lot of people that I'm going to be able to recognize and identify as we go forward.
Which is good, because, I think I was going to run out of ways to refer to people. Hat Guy was pretty simple, but already Tackle Hat Guy was kind of stretching it because there were 4 of them, or 5 of them with the same taco hat, so we were going to run into trouble sooner or later.
Well, that's okay, because if you were to use names, even the ones that I put into the book, I'm probably not going to recognize them. That's the other big issue I have, and one of the reasons that I need to make a significant change in my approach to the game. You see, this accent just isn't going to work. So, let us investigate the mystery that is afoot. By which I mean afoot in front of my face, because I have to lean in very close due to my recording setup. We're on the good ship Obra Dinn, launched from the south of England in 1802, en route to Eastern Asia, possibly China, possibly Formosa. We don't know because they never even made it to the Cape of Good Hope, the southern tip of Africa. I believe the Suez Canal simply did not exist at this time. I probably should have researched in what year it was dug. Anyway, we're here with a magical book and magical pocket watch to investigate exactly what happened in the meantime, and why there was no one aboard when the ship reappeared 5 years later. Regrettably, we don't know exactly what happened after the ship left. We pick up our story in what we can think of as Chapter 2. Just as the ship was rounding the coast of Portugal, it became unseasonably cold. This exacerbated what the surgeon described as a non-contagious lung disease in 2 of the Indian sailors. Apparently, he checked everyone else on the ship. They were all perfectly healthy. But there was also nothing he could do for these 2 fellows. This was the second of them to die, I believe. I did notice that the watch itself tells us which chapter and which part we're investigating. I don't think there's anything much to be gained by re-listening to the conversation, and I still have no idea who exactly this fellow is. We know he's one of the other Indian sailors, not Solomon Syed, who was the first to decease. But this man, sitting by the bedside, I'm certain he must be the ship's surgeon, Henry Evans. And now I don't remember where he has gone. There he is. See, one of the things that I noticed as I was going through everything that I've done is that the occupations of the people on the ship are well known, and I should be drawing conclusions from those as well. I think we have also seen what happens to him, but as we've not reached that part of our recap yet, I shall refrain from entering it. This man is an officer simply here to get a report. He also will be identified as time goes on. But the presence of this man struck me as interesting. He's simply leaning against the surgeon's desk, not doing much, not very concerned about the death happening around him. There are questions about why he is here. What is he doing in this office? And for that matter, where is the surgeon's mate in all of this? I think it is quite possible that that is this man, which would answer all of our questions. But perhaps it is a bit early to draw that conclusion just yet. There are a few other things that I want to see. Because shortly after the deaths of these two sailors, they were forced to slaughter a cow for food. I don't believe that this was in the plans. We can also gain some information from this scene. Now, I did draw attention at the time to the fact that a man named Charlie seemed to be very uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before him. I believe that I looked directly at this fellow, who seems to be returning his most recent meal to the ship's vermin, without actually noticing that there was a person there. This is surely our Charlie. Now, I don't believe that the bosun's mate is going to be involved in this particular escapade. I think we will find that Charles Hershtick, the midshipman, is a much more logical person to be in this situation. Obviously, feel free to step in and stop me if I have any incorrect deductions.
If I have any objections, I will say something.
Excellent. I don't plan to do any sort of coordinated dance with spotlights strategically placed, but I do think that my conclusions are going to be sound. Now, we also know that this animal is being butchered and that there is a butcher on board. He's not the man holding the axe, because he's instructing that man where to strike and saying that he will slit the animal's throat once the deed is done. Since he is close enough to the head to point out what spot that is, I think it's this fellow. And our butcher is number 13, Emil O'Farrell. What he said certainly did strike me as an Irish accent. I'm terrible with accents, though, as you can probably tell. The other man, I've no clue at the moment. I think his identity may be revealed in time. This one, though, I think I do know who he is, but again, we will get there. And with that, I return to the future. For the moment, if I can even find it. There's someone there. But I didn't notice them during the video, so I will simply make my exit.
Well, that was who you identified as the surgeon, observing as some seamen carry out one of those that died from the illness.
As I'm
So his
sure I will
position
discover
there,
when I return to this scene during the actual capturing of new information. Not to cut you off, I simply really don't want to gain any new information while pointing out what I already know. So I think that this is an entirely different person, not the butcher. It looked very similar, but I think I'm comfortable filling in that he is James Wallace, the surgeon's mate. It simply makes too much sense not to be the case. But let's get in out of the cold, as there is something much more to my taste coming up. A proper murder mystery. And when I say proper murder mystery, I mean that the game tells us immediately who done it and what they done. But there is much more to be gleaned from this scene, and not just that the identity of the killer can immediately be filled in. I may have not got the same fellow. Let's try that again. Okay, that is him, and he is the second mate, Edward Nichols. I wanted to say I think we've seen him perish, but that does not seem to be the case. In any case, the question we must ask is not what happened here, but why? And I think the answer, if these fellows would please let me pass, has to do with this fellow here. We know him to be Hokseng Lao of the Formosan royal family. They are also traveling aboard the Obra Dinn for reasons I've not yet determined. Especially since Formosa is not even a country at this point. I believe it's still a territory of, I want to say, Taiwan. It was only ever a country for about 5 months in 1895, nearly a century after the voyage of the Obra Dinn. But be that as it may, they have something rather valuable. A shell which gleams with an otherworldly gleam. I think it's quite relevant that the gleam continues to animate, even in this frozen tableau where every speck of dust, every beam of light is frozen in time, yet this glow continues. And this shell and his brethren seem to be at the center of an awful lot of what goes on this ship. But I simply want to draw attention to it and point out that this must have been what Mr. Nichols was after. He snuck down here to the hold, saw that Mr. Lau was the only person guarding it, and knocked him unconscious. After which, he attempted to take the shell into his possession, but before he could secure it on his person, the Italian passenger Nunzio Pasqua found him, started asking questions, noticed the unconscious Lau on the floor, and so Mr. Nichols pivoted immediately, came up with a plan on the spot, killed Pasqua, and would later blame Mr. Lau for the murder. It was going to be an open and shut case. At the trial, it was the word of one of the ship's top officers against that of a man who, as far as I could tell, couldn't even speak enough English to understand the questions he was being asked. Mr. Lau was summarily sentenced to death. And with that, I must find a way to return to the present once again as we go into one of the most pivotal scenes I have thus far witnessed. At least, from my perspective.
Hokseng Lao,
There is a great deal of information to be found during this execution. Particularly, this man, the one who lands the fatal shot on Hokseng Lao. I know him, but his identity will be at the core of many of the fates we are yet to determine. So I shall withhold it until it is more dramatically appropriate. We do know a couple of other things that are going on in the scene, though. Once they're done with their shooting activities, we know that the man giving the order to shoot is a Mr. Wolf, the ship's gunner. And here we see him standing at the side of the firing line, not behind it, as is traditional, and not in front of it, which is only tradition in the Canadian sketch comedy show. You can't do that on television. As it is, I think we can currently identify him. Christian Wolf, and his nationality, Austrian. I believe we've also witnessed his death during the mutiny bit that will be coming up in a few chapters' time. But again, I will wait until we get there to reveal him. I also determined that this woman, who is so distraught, is surely Ms. Lim, another member of the Formosan royal family. There she is, Bunlan Lim. We've no idea yet what happened to her, but we shall find out. And finally, this fellow. I said at the time that he seemed to be unconcerned with events, simply writing in his little book. And I was dimly aware in the back of my mind, even at the time, that this scene that we see before us is precisely the sketch at the front of the book, the one entitled Justice at Sea, although we now know it to be nothing of the sort. This man is sketching that very sketch right now. He's represented only by his signature, but we can certainly identify him as the artist, Edward Spratt. And I believe that's all the information that I'm likely to gain from this picture at this point. There is almost certainly much more to be done, but I did not observe that while I was recording the video. I also didn't notice the rooster. Have we got the whole Chinese zodiac here? After this, things become a bit murkier. We do witness a scene taking place at the stern, where someone is using Ms. Lim as a human shield, and some people are talking about leaving the ship before they're caught. But it doesn't obviously seem to connect to any of the other things that I've witnessed so far. I've no idea who they are, why they're trying to abscond, or even who was shot in the fracas. So I won't bother to revisit that scene, as I can't explain a bit of it. Unfortunately,
just to cut in for a moment, if you were to go back to that scene and just look at the person taking Miss Lim as a human shield, you would see that it is in fact Nichols, the second mate again.
Interesting. Quite a conclusion. In the meantime, we must move forward quite a bit in our story, because unfortunately the only summary I can provide is yada yada yada, and then the ship was attacked by a giant beast. There's a bit of chaos at the time, and sadly I haven't yet witnessed the arrival of the beast to know what brought it here or what it has done in the time since. There's a lot of chaos going on in the gun deck below, and it seems that as many people die in cannon-related incidents as were killed by the beast itself. But I have no further enlightenment to provide at this time. I could probably identify the manners of death of some of those people, but I think on the whole it's better to move on for the moment. I do have something to say about this unfortunate fellow, though. And this is the part where various pieces of the story begin to come together. There seems to have been some sort of plan to attack the beast with explosive powder. And this fellow was caught in the middle of it. Now this man here has clearly secured himself to the ship in some fashion, to this wire or rope crossing between the bits, and is trying to pull this one back. Unfortunately, he was unsuccessful, and he seems to have been caught in the middle of the powder explosion. We have at least witnessed this man's death, and though I don't know his identity yet, his last words were, "Tell Pete's mother I tried to pull him back. I tried to save him." I don't know how many incidents it's likely to be involving trying to pull a person back and save them. But I feel almost certain that if I can actually find the shape of a person here, we will find this to be a man named Pete, or Peter. And I noticed only one such person on the passenger list. Peter Milroy, another midshipman. I believe we're going to find that he exploded. And if I am correct, then we should have 3 complete fates, between Nunzio Pasqua being knifed by Mr. Nichols, Solomon Syed dying of disease, and now this man. It feels good to be right. Now, I do want to revisit the next death that occurred at the hands, or rather tentacles, of the beast, because I'm certain that there is information that I gathered which I simply did not understand. We hear no words, there is no dialogue at all. But this man has been snatched up by a tentacle after apparently stabbing that same tentacle with a sword. Perhaps I was supposed to gather that this is a French saber or something. Or perhaps his tattoos are meant to indicate his nationality. I am still convinced that this is Charles Mason, the French mate of the bosun, whom we saw torn apart and were later told that was his fate. But somehow I'm simply not certain enough yet. And the strange thing is that his picture was clear the first time I zoomed in on him, before I had any of the information about the bosun. I simply don't understand what conclusion it is that I'm meant to have drawn. But at the moment, I do believe we can positively identify him. He was torn apart by the beast, and he should be Charles Minor, that's his name. I suppose it's possible that I am wrong about this if one of the first 2 people killed by the beast was also torn apart. But I'm willing to run with this for now. The final death was possibly the most tragic of them, at least from a broad perspective. Because shortly before the beast departed, I've no idea how long before, The captain's wife, Abigail, happened to be running across the deck, had a few brief words with one of the officers, and was then clubbed fatally in the head with a mast. I've not much more to say about this scene except that she was speaking to someone named Martin, and that would certainly be the ship's third mate. This is the man who is immediately in front of her, who, at the moment he says, "Run the other way," has turned the other way and is beginning to run. He also, I believe, is the man who was taking the report about the dead Indian sailor. Martin Perrott. Hopefully his fate will be elucidated soon, although I feel he may be one of the people who has disappeared between that and the next scene that we were privileged to witness. I also think there may be conclusions to be drawn from the beast's attack, largely based on information that we get a bit later on. But why did this beast attack the ship? And why did it leave? I believe that the shells that I previously drew attention to are not only a valuable treasure, but are also a cursed treasure. I believe that the beast attacked the ship because the shells were here. The captain seems to have gone down into the hold during the beast's attack and emerged to say that it had left, without giving any particular reason. However, later on we know that the captain says the shells are at the bottom of the sea. I believe that the captain went to the hold to secure the shells and remove them from the ship, jettison them into the ocean. Thus, the beast's anger was quelled, and it departed. I gather most of this information from the death of the first person in Chapter 9, here in the officers' quarters. We already know him to be the bosun, and I've no idea why he perished here. He does seem to have perhaps something sticking out of his shoulder, although that may simply be his arm, or what's left of it. I have no idea what fate he suffered, and it may have happened during the intervening time that we're told we cannot access until we have solved every other mystery. But he does finish by saying, when he hears that the beast has left, that kind of curse does not lift on its own. Someone must have done something to break the curse, which is why I think the captain threw the shells away and did not tell anyone else. Meanwhile, we can see some of the officers leaving these officers on the bottom decks and heading up to where we know that the remaining passengers on the ship, possibly among other people, are in the midst of an escape attempt. They're trying to leave in the last lifeboat, and it is quite possible that the incident that happened shortly after the execution is why only one lifeboat remains. Also, I think that gleam out there is the current location of the shells, but that's just a theory. As I try to recall what was happening at the time, let's look further into the death of this man, as I've not a great deal of information about what it is that happened above deck. But I believe that the officers here were trying to stop the people from escaping, particularly this fellow, whom I've yet to identify, and according to the game, rightly so. I think the captain was crossing the deck not to stop them from escaping, but to order that they be allowed to escape. For what reason, I don't know. Perhaps he simply saw no reason that they should remain on the ship, nor that anyone else who remains on the ship should be permitted to escape. This man is one of the last to die. I noticed that much. But I'm more curious about the fates and also the identities of the people on the ship. That is indeed Henry Evans, as I had deduced. I have no idea who this is. The game also seems to feel that I should be able to identify the two women. But though I can deduce that they are the two female passengers on the ship, I have no idea what criteria I might use to tell which is which at this time. So I shall not. Aside from that, I need to see what was happening at the last possible moment when we can observe the people in the lifeboat. It is my belief that they escaped in that lifeboat and are alive to this day, considering that one of them is Mr. Evans, rather Dr. Evans, who we know sent us the book and the compass. This should be the first person who died below deck. And this man. He is the only man remaining in the sketch wearing an officer's hat, which is common to the first, second, and third mates. I believe that even though we don't know his identity, I should be able to deduce that this is the fourth mate. What say you?
Yeah, it sounds right. Like, I'm not sure what the moment is that the game wants you to. Okay, yeah, there is a specific scene that like gives more information. I guess
Well,
they didn't calculate the process of elimination in with their unblurring.
So I don't know who this is, but while the passengers were trying to escape in the lifeboat, there was discussion going on below decks about the possibility of a mutiny. And as far as I can tell, our fourth mate came in upon the other fellows while they were plotting their mutiny and found himself to be the only loyalist on board. I think, though I have no visual confirmation at the time, that he stabbed this man as he was trying to escape, and then shot the other fellow. Meanwhile, Hoskett and this fellow, again, the central figure in a large part of our story, heard what was going on down below, went down there, and killed him to stop him from preventing the mutiny from going off without a hitch. And at this time, there is no sign of the lifeboat. I think it should be fair to conclude at this point if the game will let me simply open the book. I suppose I can only open it to this part. Oh.
No, just press escape on the sketch.
Ah, excellent. I can feel confident saying that they are alive, but apparently the game needs to know where they have gone. I think I may actually be able to determine that for one of these people. Henry Evans wants the book mailed to the French Office of Affairs in Morocco. Surely that must be where he is presently if he expects to retrieve the book there. Alas, my geography knowledge is a bit lacking.
Africa.
That is what I thought. But let us move on. Because the fourth mate is about to be taken by surprise. Although, honestly, I've not yet revealed the critical piece of information. So, let me jump ahead just a little bit here. To the man who died in this office. Not this office. The office with the pool of blood leading to it. Here he is. Because we saw that first mate Hoskett discovered him, found him to be still alive, and called for Brennan to bring the surgeon's toolkit. And now we see our man, the central figure, Man B, involved in the mutiny, cupping his ear as if he has just heard his name out of the corner of his hearing, and is leaning in close to determine what has been said. This man, who was killed by Robert Witterell during the actual mutiny, is Henry Brennan, seaman.
And at this point, we can go back to the execution and fill in what we determined earlier.
Precisely. Although, part of me thinks it would be a bit more dramatic to identify him as the killer of John Davies first. Was he not clubbed by Henry Brennan? As I told you, McD, I will never trust the game telling me what I should know and what I should not.
And we will notice there's something that was not confirmed that we have filled out completely. The man torn apart was not the bosun's mate.
And I was quite prepared to be wrong about that. Meanwhile, we do have one more complete fate that we can fill in. Because he was also killed by Henry Brennan. And from this point, there's nothing more that I have to offer to the tale except to tell it to completion. Because the few survivors of all this attack ultimately did converge on the captain's office, trying to take hold of the shells and some kind of fish whose presence in the tale I've not yet confirmed otherwise, and to do who knows what with it. I didn't understand what was happening at first because it was the first scene that I had witnessed. I thought the shells that Hoskett was yelling about were ammunition, that something was going on, they needed to defend themselves, and the captain was withholding their means of defense. I now know that to be incorrect. The captain burst from his room, shot Hoskett, and was apparently distraught at discovering what he had done. He seems to have retreated to his quarters long enough for our man Brennan to break in, searching for those shells. When he didn't find them, the captain came out, confirmed that they had indeed been ejected from the ship, and, as I remember it, drew a knife across Brennan's throat as Brennan was stabbing him with a makeshift spear that he had picked up on the deck. The third man, the final survivor among the crew, meanwhile, had climbed to the top of the stern, leapt down onto the balcony behind the captain's quarters, and attempted to sneak up on him from behind. He stabbed the captain in the side as the captain whirled around and clubbed him with the very spear he had just been stabbed with. Finally, he retreated back to his quarters, said his final words to the corpse of his wife lying on his bed, and shot himself. A reasonable summary?
I would say so.
Excellent. Then I think it's time to get into some new material.